Hello and welcome to KUBBY TV. This is Steve Kubby, your host, and today I'm going to introduce you to an extraordinary city attorney, the Seattle city attorney, Pete Holmes. Now, if we had more people like Pete Holmes in office, I can tell you this would be the greatest country on earth. It really would be. But let me show you the kind of influence that Pete has had. This is some Dorito Chips. Now, when Pete took office just a few years ago, he dismissed all the charges against misdemeanor offenses, and the police responded by going out and arresting twice as many people. But just a year or two later, here they are passing out Dorito Chips. And let me read you what it says on the special label that the police put on each of these bags of Dorito Chips, which I understand are selling up to $50 a piece on eBay. Hempfesters, we thought you might be hungry. We also thought it might be a good time for a refresher on the do's and don'ts of I-502. That's the new law in Washington that legalizes adult use. Don'ts. Don't drive while high. Don't give, sell, or shotgun weed to people under 21. Don't use pot in public. You could be cited, but we'd rather give you a warning. Do's. Do listen to Dark Side of the Moon at a reasonable volume. Do enjoy Hempfest. Remember, respect your fellow voters and familiarize yourself with the rules of I-502 at seattle.gov/police/marijuana what you need to know. Love, a little heart here, Seattle Police Department. Well, I'm obviously a big fan of Pete Holmes, so without any further delays, let's see Pete's speech at Hempfest, and then let's go one-on-one with Pete afterwards.
He's responsible for misdemeanor enforcement in Seattle. He was also an active supporter of Initiative 502, a believer in the tax regulated legal sale of marijuana to adults. And when our next speaker, City Attorney Pete Holmes, took office, he dropped the charges in all the possession cases in the city of Seattle. Because he believes in the people, he believes in justice. Give it up to Seattle City Attorney, your Seattle City Attorney, Pete Holmes.
Thank you, sir. Hello, Seattle. Hello, Hempfest. 22 years. You know, we did it. You did it. Last November, we changed the world. Did you feel it? The earth tilted a few degrees on its axis. But we're not done yet, guys. Remember, we got to bring it all the way home. You've got to have a legal place to buy it. You need to have a legal place to consume it. And we're working on that. We're working on it, and we're watching the federal government. Because 502 is now the law of Washington, but it's not the law of the land yet. We're on our way. Let's show them the way. Hey, we've had a lot of good news lately. How about Sanjay Gupta? He was going to be our Surgeon General. He said, and he apologized for participating in 70 years of lies to the American public about marijuana. Eric Holder, the top law enforcement officer of this country, is now revisiting this insane war on drugs. And we've got to keep up the pressure, and we can show that we have a better way, a better way. And you know what? There's one other thing that happened today. You'll hear about it on the news tonight and all weekend. A lot of you have orange fingers. And that's a good thing, okay? The Seattle Police Department has a sense of humor. But remember, Vivian told you, when I took office January 1, 2010, 502 wasn't even in draft form. And I dismissed all the pending charges, and we never charged another one. And I want you to know, and this is where you got to think about this, that year, that first year in office, the same police department that just gave you Doritos arrested 2 to 3 times as many of you for possession just to stick it in the city attorney's face. And when we change the law, then they hand out Doritos. So, remember, respect the vote. We've got to bring 502 forward. Respect the vote. Show the way to the rest of the country. And I want to mention one more thing. We've got another election this November. I'm on the ballot. I would sure love to have your vote. No one's running against me. But let's show them that when a prosecutor steps out and does the right thing, you return him back to office, and you do it with big numbers. Please show a little love. And then you can see I'm backing a new guy for mayor. The same time that we enacted 502 and legalized marijuana, this state also said we're going to have equality of marriage. And Ed Murray was the architect of that. We need a mayor that knows how to get that work done to help us finish the work on 502. And so I ask you to vote for Ed Murray and for me this fall, this November, and respect the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete Holmes, the greatest city attorney in the greatest city at the greatest Hempfest in the world. What can you say?
Well, Pete, that was a great speech. But tell me, how are things stacking up right now? How's it working out?
I think it's apparent to anyone who thinks this through that the war on drugs has been a terrible failure. It has made us the #1 jailer nation on the planet. It has cost us incredible amounts in coin and damage to our communities. And it's time for a new approach. And that was the name of the campaign, New Approach Washington, to legalize, regulate, and tax marijuana.
So, Pete, would you say that we've reached a tipping point?
It absolutely has reached a tipping point. We have 2 states that voted overwhelmingly by double-digit margins to legalize marijuana just last November, and the momentum is picking up. We have now approaching 20 states that allow medical marijuana. And we've also seen in the last week a lot of other indications that on the federal front, we're starting to break through. We're starting to break through the lie that marijuana is a legitimate Schedule I drug under the Controlled Substances Act.
So how does the federal government play into all of this?
I firmly believe that the government has no reason to tell adults what they can do in their personal, private lives, absent some compelling public safety reason. Consequently, it's appropriate for us to worry about whether there's impaired driving going on our public streets and highways, but it is not appropriate for government to essentially run a nanny state and tell adults what they can and can't put into their bodies. We don't do it with tobacco, we don't do it with alcohol, and there's no reason we should do it with marijuana.
You know, Pete, you seem like a reasonable guy. Why should marijuana be regulated at all? I mean, it's obviously much less dangerous than alcohol. What's the problem with just treating it like tomatoes?
Scientists could do a better job of comparing alcohol to marijuana as far as what it does to the body and what it's done to our society. I don't think there's any doubt that alcohol is a harmful substance. And I certainly don't believe that marijuana is a completely innocuous substance. I don't advocate for absolute free, unrestrained use. And I-502, for that reason, is designed to not only legalize, but regulate and tax marijuana. It's important that we try to reduce access by youth, and it's important that we take away this incredibly lucrative market away from violent criminal enterprises. And so that's what I-502 is all about. And it's easily better than prohibition, because prohibition is essentially deregulation. Prohibition is pretending by outlawing something you're actually going to stop its use. And we know that that's an abject failure. It was a failure with alcohol during the 18th Amendment in the 1920s, and it's been a failure to this day for marijuana. You know, it's no question that the city of Seattle itself is a tolerant, enlightened city. We've embraced same-sex marriage here. We've embraced legalization. And it's clear that we're trying to be smarter about public safety issues. As far as the counterculture, you know, you could make generalizations, but we're talking about reformers that have been fighting an insane government policy for decades, and it's not surprising that it's developed into this counterculture movement. The fact that relative newcomers like me, as the first sitting prosecutor to just say I'm not going to file these charges anymore, that is new, and I build on all that the reform community, this culture, as you say, brought to bear, and we stand on their shoulders. So I think it's we're all now moving forward with implementation. There's going to be some people who had it quite good financially under the old regime, where marijuana was produced quite abundantly. And now we want to shift that to a legalized, regulated system. And there's going to be some growing pains.
Well, now that the voters of Washington have spoken, and in consideration of the 10th Amendment, which clearly says that the federal government is restricted to enumerated powers, and that the states and the people retain all other powers, doesn't it make sense to just have the sheriff arrest the DEA if they try to come in and perform any raids in Washington?
We have to remember that our federal system of government means that we have two systems of laws. And I think that Sheriff Urquhart would recognize that federal government can enforce federal laws, and that, yes, you're right, he's charged with enforcing our state laws in the county of King. I think the sheriff could do the most for legalization, the most for the people of his county and his state, by seeing that I-502 is fully implemented. And every indication I've received from Sheriff Urquhart, he intends to do that. And I support him too. By the way, I'm also elected, and Sheriff Urquhart and I both take oaths of office to uphold the Constitution, both of the state of Washington and the United States. And so, while I do not believe as a lawyer that 502 is preempted by federal law, there is no question that we do need changes in the law at the federal level. And I'm optimistic. What we need to really be focusing on is not the conflict, not official against official, but rather we need to work together and see where 502 and federal law complement each other rather than conflict with each other. We both want to take away the marijuana market from criminal enterprises. We both want to keep them away from youth, because we know that harms the developing neural system. We both want to keep impaired drivers off the road. And so we believe, and the federal government is smart enough to check it out and see, we believe our system will accomplish those three goals far better than federal policy has done to date.
Well, this has been a great interview, and I really appreciate you taking time to talk with us. I have one more question for you. You've had a chance, obviously, to hang out at Hempfest and see what it's about. What do you think the world would be like if marijuana were legal and we had the same kind of experiences with society at large that we've had here with this group of up to 250,000 people at Hempfest?
It's hard not to love Hempfest. The heart and soul of a reform movement are right here in Hempfest. I have such respect for the organizers. The police department will tell you this is a mellow group. We have little or no in the way of public safety issues here, despite how large a crowd it is. And they have really modeled, I think, a Martin Luther King County approach to bad government policy. I think they have loved their government and shamed their government into doing the right thing.
Okay, well, that about wraps it up again for another episode of KUBBY TV, distributed by Pot TV and Cannabis Culture. And we're here wishing you a great 420 day.
When you close your eyes, the image comes in clear. The hazy day, the blurry year. This soft persuasion lends itself to subtle change.